Meeting to order. Start with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Michelle.
Jeremy McCord,
Here.
Bernie Poprod,
Here.
Nicole Migalorni,
Here.
Sarah Oudman,
Here.
Roseanne Bozak, Travis Dunlap, and Nick Loving are absent.
Approval of minutes, April 4th, 2022.
I have a correction, it's a minor one, on page 2, under the solar thing, it should be building mounted instead of building method. And with that change, I move that the minutes be adopted as corrected. I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, Michelle.
Bernie Poprod,
Yes.
Nicole Migalorni,
Yes.
Sarah Oudman,
Yes.
Jeremy McCord.
Yes. Michelle, you're clear on that change. You got that? all
Yes.
done now? Okay. Approval of minutes, June 6th, 2022.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from June 6th.
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Roll call, Michelle.
Sarah Oudman,
Yes.
Nicole Migalorni,
Yes.
Bernie Poprod,
Yes.
Jeremy McCord.
Yes. Communication bills and expenditures. Michelle, do we have anything on town code updates?
No. Oh, yes, kind of. The permit for the zone,
Yes.
Corinne sent Lori a redone one that has the zone line for someone to put like whatever zoning it is.
Okay.
She just has to approve it when she gets back, and she'll be back Monday. Or like,
Has to approve it, Lori.
not like approve it, but like she wants her to go over it, make sure everything's still correct on the.
Okay, so she has a draft. We're just waiting to
Yes,
see. Okay,
yes.
awesome. Report of officers, committee, staff. Wait, have anyone else? Sarah? Bernie?
I have something on the building commissioner report, though, or the building report. I don't know if that's me or but we don't have him here, so we really can't get clarification. I was wondering on the building department report, what was going on with the Jared Anderson situation.
Gotcha. See if we can't figure something out.
I was talking to him and I don't think he got a final approval. I think he moved in there. This is just what I'm hearing.
Are we talking about certificate of occupancy? Like there was never,
Never,
okay,
And that was in the building commissioner's report or building department
Right.
report. That they were to do something within 30 days, I think. They were sent a certified letter on 6/1. They received it on 6/7. They were supposed to contact the building commissioner immediately upon receipt, which was Rob Wesley. And then as of the date of the report, they had nothing from the Andersons.
I don't know.
I don't know what's next on that, that's what I was wondering.
You see,
I honestly, I think that's something that's all in the building department though, I mean, they're in violation of whatever portion of our time code that requires us to have a certificate of
Yeah, I don't
occupancy
know.
issue.
That's not necessarily something for the board to
Right.
enforce. That would be more for, you said the building commissioner.
Right.
Needs to report that to the town council.
I mean, I
It was
was,
just a question for information.
Yeah, I had kind of heard through the grapevine that there was the issue with occupancy permit, but no one's contacted me on next steps.
yeah,
But along with that, there have been a number of things in the last 3 months that have been violations or extensions that have maybe, because we are waiting on getting a building commissioner full time. We don't want to forget that they need to be followed up on. So maybe there's a way that we should suggest the building department to keep a list of that. I don't know who else does.
I know for our last meeting, we had a public hearing scheduled about, if you remember, the people come here and wanted to put the different front lawn in and that side. Well, I went by there that night, the night before our meeting, to look at it, and they sodded the whole front yard, seeded the whole rest of it, got everything on. And they called up that day, right, and canceled that's it, they jumped through all kinds of hoops to do it, and then all of a sudden, right at the last minute.
Old business, accessory building corrections. I know I had a brief discussion. And I guess this would come into play with that. There's issues in regards to fences and how we view them. I believe in there, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Sarah, but I believe it basically says it references it being specifically governed by either pools or fences by its own subsection, correct?
Yes, so one of the questions I had on that was for our attorney to clarify that in that situation, does the overall building accessory use ordinance, is that like an umbrella then? Or do those, by the way it's worded, do those two, are they separated out from the umbrella? Because that was not the intention at the time, but. So that could be a.
I mean, I think you can probably take that sentence out because the specific ordinance or specific town code provision regarding pools and fences would apply. Because a pool is not, and maybe it's the issue of the accessory use. Because obviously a pool or a fence is not a building.
And that's why we changed it to accessory uses, at buildings and accessory uses.
That's what I'm saying, if you take an accessory, a pool could be an accessory use.
Correct.
So if you minimize this to just be an accessory building, then you're just talking about, a building, a garage, a storage shed, there's reference to plate house or maintenance shed.
But our
Just something
our
like
intent
that.
at the time was to include uses as well as buildings. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's the way it will go from here on out. But that was the intent at the time.
But that's the thing, you say uses, but then you carve out, but not these uses.
It was because those two specific items had additional parameters that went with them.
And that's fine, I mean, you can keep it as is, but then you start having kind of exceptions to the exceptions.
That's why, what I was asking them, is our language there making it more confusing?
Well, I guess your initial analogy, I don't know which one you would say is the umbrella of the other, but basically everything that is not part of the primary building would be governed by this new ordinance, this new code, except for those governed by a specific ordinance, pools and fences.
That's partially what I remember as being correct, but it also meant that those two items had more specifications that did not apply to a
No, that's-
shed, for instance.
True.
So
But I think that they aren't governed by this ordinance. I mean, that's what when I read the sentence, all accessory buildings and accessory uses shall be restricted by this ordinance. Except is governed by specific ordinance such as 1513(8) pools and 1513(19) fences. The way I read that is to say. Pools and fences are not governed by this.
and that was not intended. That's one of those unintended, unfortunate language things. Because the pools, for instance, were to fall within the parameters of the setbacks from the property lines that we established, which I believe is 70 feet.
Like, this is the pools, do the pools already mirror that, I guess is my question, do they already say? Cause I can tell you, when I did my pool, I was 10 feet off my property line, so it was more restrictive than what
Right,
this
that's
7
why,
feet is,
that's
because,
why last year we went through all of the code and all the chapters to find any discrepancies, conflicts. And then that was the purpose of having this one, a united ordinance to govern everything. It had not been intended that the pools and the fences would be only governed by their specific section. But as I read that, then I do wonder if that's would be the impression somebody would get.
right, I understand where you're coming from, and I think the big question is, so if we eliminated that. That then would in turn disallow anyone from putting a fence on a recorded easement, is that correct? Cause I mean, that's what the,
I can't.
because if you have
say that.
setbacks and things of that nature, I mean, now you're saying that my fence has to be. Like, if you don't govern the fence by its own ordinance, now you're saying you're treating a fence like an accessory building. It is how I'm thinking of it, for at least. And if that's the case, now you're saying I have to be 7 feet off my property line, like, I wouldn't want that. I mean, that's why it has to, that's why, in my opinion, it has to be governed by its own specific ordinance. Because the fence is its own thing, I mean, there's nothing else is similar to it in that aspect, like a garage or a shed or anything like that. I mean, I understand keeping that off the line, but a fence,
I did
I
not
think it-
study that particular part, but we could look it up and see what's listed. Because I didn't,
because a fence right now doesn't require a setback.
that
From
might
your,
be in those two sections, I don't remember.
I mean, you can put fences on or just on this side of the property line.
Oh, yes, I'm aware of that, but.
but I'm just saying that if we didn't. If we weren't governing fences by its own ordinance like that, then potentially you have a lot of things that would be conflicting. If you were trying to apply this ordinance with that. If I'm thinking about this,
I understand what you're saying, I'm just looking up what it actually says, because I personally don't remember. So that's in 15-13-9.
Well, 15-13-8 swimming pools.
What about fences?
Well, that's a different one. I was,
I think that's 15-13.
speak up, Ernie.
I thought we were doing all of this to eliminate where you had stuff in two different places that you had to look up all the time.
Yes,
So that would be that you would do your one for there, and then you have one for fences, then you have one for pools. And that governs what you were supposed to do with those.
Right, and that's why I think this language that's in there. Kind of makes sense to me as far as that it's going through there and it's saying that it doesn't apply to fences or pools because those are governed by their own sections.
Right,
And if we wanted to do something specific to those things, we probably needed to do those within those ordinances. Just so it's clear, so that you don't, if you're putting a pool in, you don't have to try and go look at an accessory building ordinance to find out if it's gonna meet the code.
right, you got a pool ordinance, you don't wanna have to go to accessory building ordinance, the building commissioner's got a hard enough job now as it is, let alone having to look at two different places all the time.
so we did not really adjust the original section 15-13-19, which was landscaping, fences, and screening. Because that was its own separate individual space. If there's nothing in there regarding setbacks, being on the property line, any of that, so that's that section, if you would like to change this, would have to be redone as well.
we'd like to change what?
If you wanna have everything in the fencing section,
Right.
15, 13, 19. This would have to, whatever you wanna take out of the accessory building and accessory use would have to be reevaluated as to what would go in your landscaping, fences and screening section, which is 15, 13, 19. And you know, it's been a little while since we went over this, there was a lot of things at once. If there's an issue that is not understood, then now is the time to correct it before we go back in with a whole new ordinance, we have to correct it again, but I thought that the way it was presented was in order to avoid having most of the things that control the fence and where it was kept the same as the other accessory buildings and uses. The only thing that is really discussed as far as fences and that landscaping, fences and screening is the height of fences on front yards and other than front yards. That fence posts shall be installed on the inside of a fence and that barbed wire and razor wire are permitted in SD1, SD2, SD3, SD6 only. That's all that covers.
Right.
So how you wanna handle that is up to the rest of the commission. I personally would keep it in here myself, but that's me. So I have another lawyer question for how we're approaching this though. So, when we started doing this, one of the concerns was that there are so many things lumped together in a paragraph. It's very easy for people to miss or misunderstand the intent of the paragraph. And we asked the town council if we could change to formatting points. And so if we do the ordinance like this,
Like the, what do you?
like you presented as a draft ordinance. I'm
Well, the
sorry.
reason I did that is because based on this, it looks like we were taking, that was A, B, and then this was to be moved up, but I mean, that's just formatting.
Okay, I just wanted to find out from you what we had to consider. here.
Because it looked like there was A, B, and then all of this would be, and then down here, you jump to C, all detached accessory buildings shall be by the rear principal building line. And then all of that was.
No, the other ones were supposed to be renumbered or whatever.
Oh, that wasn't clear in this document, but that's just formatting.
Yes, I just want to make sure that it didn't make a difference to how we approached it.
I mean. Yes and no, if it's gonna be if it's gonna affect things that you can't have A and then A, you need to.
Correct.
It can change things all the way down the line, but that's just, again, you know, the formatting of it, the most important thing is to get the language in how you want it, that's not. But just to clarify, so what the desire was to totally strike 15-13-6 regarding. Because in here it said attached accessory buildings, but when I'm on the town code website, that 15-13-6 is the shipping containers. Storage.
Yes, because detached accessory buildings and accessory buildings or end uses were supposed to be combined into one ordinance so that it was all in one place.
Okay, yeah, because I see if there's two 15-13-6s, and that's,
Yes,
Right, and I mean, that was obviously our main issue is that it's duplicated. Like,
you are correct.
so it shouldn't be reserved, it should be 15-13-6 is the storage and use the shipping / cargo containers.
I believe that is true, yes.
Yes, should be. The detached accessory building should be struck, the storage and use of shipping / cargo containers shall remain, and then. Section 151330. Is essentially what we are providing.
Yes. So, I also had the little discussion about this today, and, there were some things that were unclear. And I'm wondering if this particular ordinance, instead of just looking at the specifics of the language at this time, if maybe you want to take a look at the ordinance and see if it's what the planning commission would like to have enforced. I have a couple other questions that go with it. That's probably the best question to ask first. You want to take a whole look at the whole thing.
I think ultimately I want this thing right. I don't want to just keep doing this thing partially. I think a couple of things that you pointed out to our attorney is correct. I mean, as far as like making sure that that's not reserved and that 1513.6 is for storage containers, that's how that's supposed to be. I think we have to read through a little bit of it though. I honestly, I think this is something that if Nicole, if you wanted to work with me a little bit on this, we can kind of go over a few things and have a good discussion into the next meeting and make sure that if we're going to make any more changes, that we get that all addressed together and get it to our attorney to be able to put together one solid ordinance and not have to pass this and then turn around and start working on changing it right away. Because we're doing that too much.
So one of the questions that Attorney Patton had in his email was also, if that was indeed.
I think I understand now, so I see what you're saying, so the fourth, we have A, B, and then this one said E, but it was struck, but I didn't see in the document that was to become C, and then this one is D, and that's with regard to the pool and fences, so this would be D. All accessory buildings and accessory uses shall be restricted by this ordinance. Is that what you envision as D?
I think it's that, yes, I looked low at that now. Accessory. Yes, that would be D.
Okay.
Yeah, because somehow when we change the formatting in it, it just did its own thing. It wasn't correct.
Okay.
So. And then, see, just for the review of the process, this was the document I created, then it went to Councilwoman Biancardi. She put it into a different format based on the notes, and then it went.
Okay. That's why sometimes it's better to just, like I said, get the language that you want and then worry about the formatting later, because otherwise things get.
Right. Because if you look further down that original document I gave you, we have C again, twice.
Well, that's
Yeah.
that's why I thought everything above it was B.
Yeah, I understand, so. Another question that came up for Jeremy and Nicole to consider is that, do we need to have the word fence specifically listed in the definition of accessory building and use? Because we say it's not limited to, but will include that, but fence is not one of them. And perhaps that would be,
I guess my issue with that though is kind of like what we talked about, so. If you start including a fence with accessory building. Is it the intent of this board to not allow a fence to enter and be built on an easement, on a recorded easement.
That was our original discussion, and there were several
And
people.
if you're gonna include a fence with an accessory building, then that, it kind of looks like that's the direction that you're trying to go. And I think that's the clarification that the board needs to make right now, because I'll be honest, I'm 100% opposed to it. Like, I think because to tell somebody that if we have an easement, that property, you can't fence that and enjoy it and use that, what if an easement runs through? Not, let's say the rear, but let's say it runs through partially through the middle of somebody's property. You could potentially be dividing somebody's property, like losing like hundreds and hundreds of usable feet. I mean, so think about if one of these properties off of Hagland here had an easement that ran through the rear of their property, you couldn't fence that thing at all. Or if you could lose hundreds of feet of the back of your property.
I think that may be an example to consider if we actually had it. And a few years ago, I looked at all the easements that I could find in the town of Burns Harbor. And there weren't really that kind of a situation. The most limiting situation is the tree and landscaping easements, which exist in Portland's Landing, and that's the only place. But just to back up a minute, when this was being discussed and developed, there was a different board sitting here, and there were a number of people on that board who were adamantly opposed to having anything, any easement. So that's why the direction went this way. So that's why I say you may wanna just.
Normally with regards to easements, you're not permitted to put permanent structures, a house, a deck, a shed, etc. But you take the property subject to that easement and you are essentially forewarned that if you plant trees, put a fence, etc. and whoever the easement owner is needs to access the property to work within the easement, if it's a drain or if it's a utility easement, they need to come up and dig for any pipe, wire, whatever. That they can come in and require you to take that out. If you don't take it out, then they can take it out and your fence is damaged, destroyed. And so I understand what you're getting at, as far as you want to be able to use the property, but at the same time, you need to realize that you collectively need to realize that if the fence has to come out because the easement needs to be accessed, then it needs to come out and it can go back in afterwards, but.
And I agree with that. I think that, it is, I mean, at your own risk type thing, realize that it could have to come out someday. But I think just forbidding somebody to fence their property because it's an easement, I think is just.
Where was it?
No, this is the question. If we treat a fence like an accessory building,
Yeah,
we're saying accessory buildings can't go in the easement, but if we're treating a fence the same way, that's how I read the intent of adding a fence to this.
but I
don't agree with that.
And I think maybe you can have language, to that effect, and if we pull out the fences, and I think we somewhat are with the language about all accessory buildings shall be restricted except as governed by specific ordinance. And then when including fences, and then at the end, the development standards contained shall not apply to detached accessory structures used for storage. Except as in regards to, but again, it's not, a fence isn't creating a 200 square foot structure.
I guess my big thing is, so if what's the purpose of adding fence to accessory buildings and accessory uses if we're not trying to keep them out of easements? What do we gain by that?
I was just.
Or are we better off just,
On the original ordinance development, which was informed by other people's opinions, not necessarily those who are here. So, and I believe at the time, one of the examples was in either Trail Creek or Cortland's Landing. And there is a utility and drainage easement, I think, that runs between properties and has, some people have built fences across it, some people have buildings on it. And that particular one does occasionally still need to be accessed apparently. But that was the discussion at that time was that then, let's just say, nothing in an easement. So that's what that's based on.
Yeah, I get that. I don't feel that a fence is what,
Did you skip that meeting?
I just don't feel that a fence was the intent, because then you're taking like, you're gonna have 10 foot of the rear of this property and that property, we're gonna have 20 foot lanes behind. There's just unusable space, because it's gonna be behind these people's fences. And it creates a big, I don't know, just waste of space, if you will.
I would suggest that since the current board discussing this is the slimmest of margins of a quorum, and which does not include your 2 town council members who would actually be passing this ordinance ultimately, that maybe they be included on their viewpoints on the subject of whether or not.
Right, no, I agree. I think honestly, so. Me and Nicole will look at this and see what we can do to move forward with it, but. I mean, I think it's gonna be ultimately something that we have to keep on the agenda and revisit next month. I don't think there's any way we can move forward with what we have.
So Jeremy, Nicole, you get together and providing me further tweaks to what I have here, and I can make those changes regarding that, A through.
Right, the things that you're already clear on that stuff, I think is,
Okay,
you're good to move forward with that, at least, so it's
because
done.
I can tweak that and get that just the 2 of you if you want.
That would be awesome. Because beyond that, we're just gonna look to see, make sure that it's clear enough as we read through everything, how fences are, and then ultimately potentially have a little bit more discussion at the next meeting if we have more people to talk about fences. Just to see that we're all treating them what the intent is. With that, new business, review of bonds, maintenance guarantees, letters of credit. Earlier we had a question on whether or not you have the building commissioner here, and that's part of the reason is this. So I don't have any information on whether any of this is complete. Did we?
You have a copy of Pat Leggy's.
Yeah, so for that, yeah.
Oh, you're
I don't
talking-
have a problem with that. I was actually speaking of the,
Conditional.
the conditional certificate of occupancy is in regard to the yard sidewalk. Well, one's a yard security and the other one's a yard sidewalk and driveway security. But
These two, I'm not sure. I know the other ones have gotten their certificate of occupancy. This 1134 Daniels Court. I think that might be the one that Rob's inspecting tomorrow.
So the one on the other side of Daniels Court, I don't know what the address is,
Or is it 1148? There's one that he's inspecting tomorrow.
right, and I believe that's what I call lot 60, but, I was down there today because I wanted to see, based on what was on the list, what had happened. And the one that's at the end of Canfield on Daniels Court, which I believe he's probably most concerned about, that one does have the yards, front yard sodded and the backyard seeded. And the same is true on at least the front yard. I couldn't quite see and forgot to look more carefully on the backyard of the one on the opposite side, which I believe has been taken off here. So as far as I could tell, as far as town requirements, it looked like that had been done as far as the yard.
for 1143. I mean,
Yes.
if you had to take a
that's the right
guess.
number, yes.
Well, because I would say the same thing with 209 Fairchild. I would say the driveway's intact, sidewalk's intact. It's been sodded. I don't know that they actually finished the sod between the driveway and the property line on the east side of it.
think they have.
If they have now, but if not, that would be like the littlest of things, I don't think it would be, they. Basically did almost everything from the whole thing besides for that little section, maybe they've gotten since then, I was gone for a week, so I don't really know. But I mean, we're talking about 7 feet of property as opposed to, they did have. All the backyard's done, all the front yard's done, the driveway, the sidewalk, none of that was intact the last meeting, it's all been done. So I don't think there would be I think the worst case scenario is we'd have the opportunity to do something like those kids as opposed to trying to call a bond over. Essentially 7 feet by 30 feet of sod.
I would say that, for our purposes, it appeared to me also that the ones on Daniels Court have fulfilled town requirements. I don't know that they've done anything as far as certificate of occupancy, but the date on the one on Daniels Court, it seems to me that that was a 2-story house that had been finished a while. And I believe that one has a sod and ceiling also, so that would be, that's prior to when they're going to, expire. But is there anything we have to do with those? Isn't that more just an administrative issue? But with Mr. Clay, I believe we do actually have to act.
We're gonna have to act on that one, right, to
Right.
release the bond, or release the money. But I think on the other two, Rob just gives the okey dokey on it, or the building commissioner says, you fulfilled it, give it back. Cause if you've read on, some of his reports. Their reports, it's in there, I believe, but
Yeah, I don't know, honestly, I don't know how it works on the conditional certificate of occupancy, whether or not Rob can. Just authorize Jane to give the money back, or if it has to go through this board, that I'm not clear on.
It doesn't have to go to the board, there's a letter that they fill out that gets signed. That Lori would then give to Jane to release.
Okay,
Last time
so who
we
makes
were-
sure it gets taken off of our sheet then?
Jane,
Jane.
once she gets the letter from Lori that says it can be released, then Jane takes it off.
So Jane controls this? What do you do?
yes.
Yes,
Jane.
Okay.
controls that.
Alright, very good. Well, we don't have to do anything with those, so. Do we just need to? Recommend, like, do I need a motion and a second to release
Trail Creek
Yeah.
Phase 2.
Babcock second subdivision?
Oh.
But here's this, well, what does it say? Reference Babcock, okay, review. Commonly referred to as, okay, so we're talking about Trail Creek Phase 2. In the amount of $3,646. Do we need a motion to go have Jane release that, or do we just need to instruct her to release that?
I can't remember historically in the minutes, I think it,
I think
Would we be
the
safer
past
just-
ones, I think we've done a motion.
I think
I
so
thought so
too.
too.
I think we did a motion.
I think so too.
I mean,
Because Jane's gonna want the minutes, but
I'll kick it to do a motion.
Yeah, and then I write a letter and I send it to her that says like the plan commission made a motion, but
Very good.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion,
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion? Roll call, Michelle.
Nicole Migalorni,
Yes.
Sarah Augman,
Yes.
Bernie Paprad,
Yes.
Jeremy McCart.
Yes. Michelle, the only other thing that I would add is that if we can just maybe send an email to the interim building commissioner, Rob Leslie, just to let him know that we have 2 conditional certificate of occupancies, which are those yards that we talked about, that are expiring in July, and we'd like to make sure that the homeowners, if they haven't already done so, or the developers, whoever's responsible for those, maybe give them a last notification, hey, if it's hasn't been completed, please try and complete it by the state.
And like I said, I think
They both have 10 days or so.
I think the Daniels Court honestly is the one he's inspecting tomorrow.
I'm just saying if we can, instead of just saying that we think it's good.
Okay.
If it's good, it's good, if not. They'll have that opportunity.
Okay.
Good of the order, any other business?
I got a couple things. So, I had a question. We have our fee and use table that we've been looking at, and the fees and the use table, two separate items. And are we still considering having RC1 and R1 permits be the same for the same house?
Are you talking about trying to have the fees cost the same, whether it's residential or RC1 if you're building the same house?
Yes,
I think that's the intent, yes.
that's currently not the way it is administered.
And that is, I think that's based on how the fee and use table is existing.
Correct. What needs to happen to correct that?
What needs to happen is we need to have the building commissioner. Is because it was instructed to me as opposed to making a couple changes and then have to go through and making more changes, because we were in discussions with our prior building commissioner about any and all fee changes that needed to be updated, and then we lost our building commissioner. So I don't want to make a bunch of changes to the fee table, one randomly that we don't know anything about, I mean, because that doesn't seem proper things to do. And two, doing it halfway. Like, I don't want to make changes and then a new building commissioner come in and like have no idea why we're making these changes.
Okay, but along with that, there's a couple of errors that we have that we already know about in our use table. That, like for instance, in Harbor Trails, that townhomes, twin homes, duplexes, whatever we're gonna call them, are technically not allowed. So depending on who you would have coming as your building commissioner, if they go through our use table, they could be denied a permit, and I believe there's a couple lots that are still have that type of use intended for them. So I guess I'm mentioning it because I don't want those things to be lost too long over time. So it's been a few months since we first brought it up. And I personally, in the last month, have been in a meeting where I was questioned about some of the things in our use table, because what was in our ordinances conflicts with what our use table says, and businesses are interpreting that as a no-go to come to Burns Harbor. So
Right.
this is something that's a very time-sensitive thing. I understand we don't have a building commissioner, but we can only put this off so long if we actually want to have any progress on all the lots on 20, for instance, that are for sale. So, and even lots that are in the residential area that nobody knew before, that there was not that in the table that you can have it. So just some of those issues, I guess I'm concerned about having them put off so long and then have a potential conflict come about. So I don't know how soon they intend to have a new building commissioner. It's just a concern that I wanted to bring up because it is a timely issue.
If you get the opportunity, if you have some specific concerns, since I am on that subcommittee, if you wanted to email those to me. That way, if there's, let's say, a portion of that we could get together and move forward with. Because even if we do get a building commissioner at this point, he's gonna be pretty busy learning what our code is before he can make any suggestions. I think it'll be a time before that actually gets going. I don't know about. We were talking about Harbor Trails. I guess my question is, when that development went in, could there have been variances issued or anything of that nature to allow that? In there, well, our code doesn't allow it, that doesn't mean that a variance wasn't issued when they They don't,
We've done anything with Harbor Trails on variances in there.
I mean, but how, like, for,
I've been on the BZA quite a long time and can't remember going through there and doing.
so how did it ever get approved? Or did town code change since then?
I think the big use table was just incorrect.
Right. I think he went through a lot of it. I can't tell you that, but I don't know. We'll just look at it.
But I don't think the intent of is all residential properties to be able to allow a twin home or two flat in every residential neighborhood. I mean, but that would be like that suggestion. I don't know that that would be the intent.
I don't either, and I might not be happy if I'm got all residential and then all of a sudden, to me, duplexes are
Well,
transit, you know.
I think we shot down, I wanna say, I don't remember, maybe I'm wrong, but I think it was Johnny Miller. I think he came in here with a plan a few years back about property off of Babcock, wanted to develop it, he wanted to put in some twin homes like that, and we told him no on that aspect. I mean, if it was off of this, then.
Yeah. Okay,
But that's also the same area that there's, you ran into that issue with the home on 20 that was torn down. Now by zoning, it cannot have a home rebuilt on the same property because the use table does not allow it.
Correct.
So those are a couple things that are current that I'm not gonna give you money, you know.
I think,
Because I won't be here.
well, I don't think, well, that one, that guy's not burning the place, not, I mean, burning up to get it redone. Because if you see the weeds are over there and he tore the other building down and everything, and it's not a nice sight in there anyway.
Right, it's just issues that we should
Right.
correct before we have, before somebody, other buyer comes in and goes through the same thing.
yeah, I think all of these have to be like,
And there are other ones that I have marked on a different sheet, but those were the first two that came up, and I think actually Travis had mentioned them in a meeting before, so.
any other good of the order, or any other business?
Sarah, is this your last meeting?
This is my last meeting.
Okay, I personally want to thank you for your hard work and everything else. And get back in town, come to me.
Okay. We'll actually still be in town through middle of August, so I might be at another meeting, I don't know. But thank you.
Okay.
Honestly, yeah, you've put more effort into, well, I mean, I've always agreed with everything. You put more effort into this and doing stuff than anybody that's been here, so thank you.
And I don't feel we always need to agree with each other, or anybody on the board needs to agree with each other. I think that having disagreement makes a better ordinance and a better approach, because different perspectives are considered. And then we'll represent more of the people.
It's awesome, because I enjoy arguing.
Well, good for you. Nicole, that'll be on your list now to argue with you.
Need a motion to adjourn?
I'll understand that motion.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second.
You make that, I'll second it. It doesn't matter.
However you want to do that. Roll call, Michelle.
Nicole Migalorni, Sarah Ogman,
Yes.
Bernie Poprod,
Yes.
Jeremy Ricard.
Yes.